And hey, Travis Richardson here, holistic health coach, and I've got my best friend Travis Lee all the way out from Fort Collins, Colorado, with me today. We're going to be talking about outdoor fitness, why it matters, why it's a superior form of training, and a lot more. And so, Travis Lee is a co-founder of Apex Movement, Parkour, and Athletics in Fort Collins. He currently lives there with his wife and beautiful daughter Nova. He is very well trained in a lot of different. He's got a lot of diversity. He was, studied in China and learned kung fu. He was my business partner in a program that we called Max 10 that did, filled with strength training, kickboxing, resistance training, that kind of thing. But has an incredible story. He was diagnosed with cancer when he was 19. He's overcome cancer and really become an amazing person. As far as certifications goes, he's a parkour level 1 coach, MoveNat certified trainer, and CrossFit level 1. Travis, welcome to the show.
Hey, Trav, how you doing, buddy?
Good, man. So, tell me your story. I know your story, but I want the listeners to know your story just in general about how you came to health and wellness and everything that you're doing now.
Yeah. So my background is kind of unique in that I was raised in Iowa. I grew up on a farm, and so I spent a lot of time outside and was able to connect with nature at a young age. And so I would say that's probably where my appreciation for outdoor training started. I can recall being, 8 years old and running around outside and sort of having this moment where I was like, I think it was a realization of basically of aging, or just how the process of life sort of takes us out of being youthful and a kid, at least as I saw it then. And thinking to myself, being like 8 outside in a tree, thinking to myself, hey, there's going to be a time when I'm not going to be able to move like this maybe. And that concerned me for a minute, but then I thought, hey, you know what? I'm just going to go play right now as if I was, sort of in the winter of my life, and I didn't have the ability to do the things that I can do with the same amount of energy or durability, mostly is what kids have, right? So I remember just spending an afternoon running around and playing and climbing in trees, and at that time I had access to chickens to chase, so I need to reintroduce that to my training sometime soon. And just being really appreciative of having that youth, and that was pretty young when I think back on it. That was 8 years old, and having that realization. I'm not so sure if that was foresight as much as it was maybe just looking at the culture around me, even in that time, and that would have been in the 90s, and seeing how adults had forgotten how to move or forgotten how to play, and they were stuck in their own institutions, and then that was not something that they did, and trying to hold on to that and value that. Later on in life, my family went through a pretty long period of poverty that was through my teens. My dad was diagnosed with MS, and so we ended up living just in some low-income environments, and for a period of time, we didn't have electricity, or we're kind of just living off the grid, which a lot of people strive for right now. People sit in their suburban homes and they're like, oh, I need to live off the grid. I would suggest everybody try it for a period of time. I don't know if it's romantic as they're imagining. But the value of that was that, it's just kind of the story of a boy and his dog, right? I had a dog that I loved, and I'd chop wood in the winter to fuel a wood burning stove, and then just spend my days in really crisp, quiet forests with snow, and run around. I had a snowboard at the time I'd throw on my back. We'd go out hike and find some berms and some little kickers, and just ride around, me and my dogs. So that was a really tranquil part of my life, and I think that it created a perspective that helped me understand that what can you do alone, when it's just you and maybe one other companion or yourself. How can you explore life, and that you don't need a lot of institutions, and that's a reoccurring theme that I'll talk about, to create growth, right, and to create good life experiences. During that time, I started reading Chinese philosophy, so Lao Tzu, and that got me interested in Chinese. So I wanted to study Chinese, and we didn't have it in our school district. So the school I went to for high school was awesome, and I was in and out of school. That's a whole nother story. But I did land at a high school, Metro High School in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, that I fell in love with. Awesome teachers and mentors, which is amazing for somebody to have when I didn't have a lot of access to financial resources. They sent me to college when I was 16 to start studying Chinese. So by the time I was graduating, around 18, I was already able to speak basic, fluent conversational Chinese. And I really wanted to go to China. So I sort of put myself out there and got in a local newspaper, had an article put out on my interests and that I was looking for sponsors. And Cindy Thompson, who I'm forever grateful to for providing me with the opportunity to travel to China, she sponsored me. And her and her husband, Jonik, sponsored me to fly to China. So I got a one-way ticket, and I had never been outside of the surrounding states of Iowa. Like by car, I traveled a little bit. And so this was a big experience for me. I'd never been on a plane before, but I was like, surely a one-way ticket to China is the answer to make my life more interesting, right? So I definitely wasn't wrong about that, but yeah, so I flew on my first flight to Chicago, from Chicago to Tokyo, from Tokyo to Dalian, China, where I went to university. And I can remember showing up and being like, 18 years old and just stepping out. I didn't even arrange for transportation to the school. I got there at like midnight, and I just walked out of the airport in this very this is northeastern China, so I felt like it was not the China of kung fu movies. Like it was very sort of monochrome and Soviet. So I was like, whoa, okay, what'd I get myself into? And just took a cab in and showed up at the front gate of the school. It was locked, and so that was perhaps the first time that I realized, whoa, I really have gotten myself into something. Luckily, I found my way in, and it was all downhill from there. And I studied wushu there and learned a lot of Chinese. When I came back, I met a lot of good friends there too, which one of the friends who ended up hiring me to come out and work in Colorado. So that it all kind of links together very well. But when I came back, I was in China for about a year, and I came back and noticed I had some trouble breathing, and noticed that there was a lump in my neck, and it got to the point where it was so intense that at night, I couldn't breathe. Like if you've ever had, anybody who has asthma, I'm sure can relate to this, where if they inhale and then there's this wheezing and your lungs don't fill with air. And I didn't know what was going on because I didn't have any sort of history with asthma or anything like that. So I went to the doctors, and at first they couldn't figure out what was going on, but after a blood test, they diagnosed me with Hodgkin's lymphoma and stage 2. So I went through several months of chemotherapy. And during this whole time, it was really rough for me too, because I hadn't rebounded financially from the trip. So I was like bumming rides to chemo. I was only 30 days into a job that I'd gotten at a call center. And so I wasn't eligible for any sort of long-term disability or anything like that. I ended up working full time, 3 10-hour days. And then I would go get chemo, recover for 4 days, and then go get chemo again. And during that time, I didn't have any form of transportation. So it was like, hey, can you give me a ride to chemo? Hey, can you give me a ride to work? It was quite a rough moment, right? So but the biggest thing I remember out of that is sort of not being able to move. So for all my life, I always had that perspective from an 8-year-old jumping around in barns and running around and climbing on trees to this athlete that I turned into, this young athlete in China who was sort of living out their passion as a martial artist, to this being crippled at a pretty young age. Not entirely, but when you're going through that sort of treatment, you don't have any sort of cardiovascular respiratory endurance. Your strength is gone. You're just trying to not throw up for the most part. And to be over this period of time where I was highly dependent on movement for happiness, to have to be basically bedridden. It was just very depressing for me. And when I came out of it, it left me really with a deep appreciation that, hey, I don't care how old you are. You know, I often hear people say things like, you know, you've got your whole life ahead of you. You can, you know, take your time, do what you want. And I would say that I don't entirely agree with that, because, you know, you're pretty fragile. You know, you're just human, and it can be taken away from you at any moment. And we're not talking about, you step out in the street and get hit by a bus. But I'm just saying, like, everything from your physicality to your attitude, to your will to train and do the things that you want to do in life, to play with your kids, or to have time with to yourself, to explore things physically, that can go away very quickly. So I wouldn't play around with it, I guess, is my life lesson from that. At any time, it could be gone. And so after that, I had a mentor that I met, Daniel Pesina, who is very well known for his martial arts and wushu background. I started a little kung fu gym and tried to learn as much as I can by partnering with him, and that was, I think, one of the moments where I felt very on track with my life. And then we crossed paths again. We started Max 10 together, and after a couple years of that, my friend who I was actually roommates with in China contacted me and invited me to come out and work for him for his startup tech company in Fort Collins, Colorado. And I jumped at that because I've just always envisioned being around mountains. And so that's very inspirational to me. And I thought, boy, Colorado is a great place for my personality type. And so I ran off to Colorado. My daughter had just been born. I moved out when she was a week old. And it took 2 months or so before the entire family got out there. But we're out here rather. And once I was out here, I just started exploring the movement opportunities out here. I got into CrossFit for a little bit, got an internship with a local gym and explored what they had to offer. And then I got a little bit into MoveNet, which I heard about from Rob Wolf podcast. And I started really exploring the major issues, because I was pretty happy. I was outside a lot, and work was very accommodating with that. And I was wondering, you know, what was the difference between this and why do people run off to like Colorado and California and places where there are more scenic areas to try and find a lifestyle that they enjoy, right? And I think it was just that we've domesticated ourselves, right? We're so concerned about how we've domesticated animals, and we never stop to turn around and say, did we domesticate ourselves? But really, most people travel from one drywall box to another plastic box to another drywall box. That is their home, their car, and work, right? Yeah. And how much time do they really spend in the natural environment that they evolved in, excuse me. And once I was out here, I got in with my current business partners and mentors, Jesse and Justin Clark. They're parkour athletes, and these are guys who nobody ever domesticated them. They started parkour when they were 12, and they just never stopped. They've never looked back, and they're great examples of what human beings can be if they aren't over institutionalized and sucked into chairs in school and work and 9 to 5 and some even college environments. Yeah. So we started.
Sorry, finish up. I've got a good question I want to ask you, but finish up, and then I've got a really important question.
All right, almost there. All right, so we started Apex Movement Fort Collins together, and that's a parkour gym, and that's sort of where I'm at right now. And now I'm just trying to understand what exactly has made me so happy, and why our gym is really so popular and has such a positive contribution in a really healthy way for people. And that's what sort of brought me back into the outdoors, almost full circle. Whereas now my training, what I would call my formal training, if you even want to call it that, is training outdoors with my friends and meeting new people that way, and exercising in that capacity. And it's almost full circle to when I was a kid playing, sandlot baseball with buddies in apple orchards and stuff like that. So that's where I'm at right now. Long story made longer. I have the background to understand the perspective for sure.
No, buddy, man, I love it. I mean, I'm hearing some of that. Every time you tell your story, I learn something new about you. And I mean, like, I'm listening, and I'm sure everybody else is too. Like, wow, that's some fascinating stuff. I mean, you guys don't know this, but well, you do now. He just told you. But I mean, this guy's fluent in Chinese. I mean, he went to China. I mean, just recapping, came back. I sometimes feel like you minimize what you've done with cancer, but I mean, that's huge. You're a huge inspiration, man. And don't ever think that you're not, because what you're doing, where you are now from where you've been, it's freaking huge. And by the way, Trav and I were in China. He was so kind enough to take me to China, and I got to be on the Great Wall of China and did a kung fu pose. So it was pretty cool. But here's the thing, and then you started to touch on this, Trav, right at the end, which was, I'm very curious what your thoughts are in terms of, so like in yoga, for instance, we always talk about how you, my yoga teacher taught me how you move your body is reflective of sort of your inner state, and your inner state is reflective of how you move your body. So this whole idea of yoga being like mind and body, right? One is reflective of the other. If you believe that, if you agree with that, then how does that relate to, because you hear Travis talking here about movement quite a bit, movement. He's not talking about resistance training. He's not talking about doing specific kind of thing. He's generalizing into movement, and there's a reason why. So my question is, how to you does, or what's the issue with us being constrained to our little boxes, our little work environments, and how does that lack of movement affect like us internally? Like, I feel like you're this guy, I get this picture of somebody out there. I've seen your pictures. You're hulking up like logs, and you're out in the woods, and I've seen the videos, and you're doing these cool things, and I've seen it transform you as a person. So taking that back to the opposite of that, how are we being affected by not being outside, by not doing the things I see that you do in videos?
Yeah, dude, thanks. That's an awesome question, and I really appreciate the honorable mention. So it's a really good question, and it's complicated. All right, so there's not a simple answer to that, because I feel like the people who need to hear that message the most have no idea what they're missing. Okay, so some people who are involved in movement, and get into a state of flow. Okay, and when I'm talking about when you almost feel like you're in cruise control, you go and you do something physical, and you just get into that mode where there is no resistance, or you don't require conscious steering of your direction. So a good example of that might be everything from an individual who just likes to run. So I think that's probably more likely what's going to happen, is you're going to have some people who can relate to this, who have, maybe they do dance, and they know that when they're dancing, they feel like they don't have, that the movement just comes, all right? That there's a deeper part of what they're doing that is allowing them to express themselves and operate outside of being really like choosing a lot about what they do. Do I turn left here, or do I turn right here? They just run and they go. Or somebody who practices CrossFit, and they get in the middle of their WOD, and they know the repetitions, they know the work, they just get into it, and they experience sort of a high. It could be described as like a runner's high or something like that as well. But in the end, that's too simple, because we want to make it more complex and more interesting, and people want to make it a checkbox. They want to say, well, I went to the gym, it was Tuesday, I took my one class, and I'm done. But it's not like that. We don't say that when we're involved in school, in formal school. You don't say, okay, well, I went and I read for 10 minutes, I'm good, I'm smart, my education is complete. It's the ongoing process that has to be pursued. And so you're really just we evolved as movers. Our bodies evolved as movers, and when we take our really strong cognitive abilities like language and our ability to solve problems and interact, and we strap that on top of this mover's body, or this mover's mind, then we have this amazing creature that is the human, right? And when we ignore that potential and we focus just on the cognitive, where we're just having conversations through computers, or maybe even just verbally in meetings, everybody's sitting in chairs all along, we're ignoring a huge amount of human potential and really ignoring a great capacity for experiencing happiness and experiencing, well-being.
Yeah. So people who are, so basically we've gotten way away from our basic natural. I mean, we didn't get to where we are here now, the ability to sit at a desk and at a laptop. We didn't get there by sitting at a laptop and on a desk. And right. So, I mean, even things like the lymph system, I mean, it doesn't move on its own. Like you have to move lymph. You have to either manually massage it, move it, or physically move your body. It doesn't move on its own. So I always look at like movement equals life, right? And if you're not moving, I mean, they even do studies. I know that showing if the people that work out daily, but don't move beyond that during the day, those people don't have as healthy of an outcome, or not, are more prone to disease than people who are moving just frequently during the day and not even working out. And so they're showing that being able to find yourself moving quite a bit is huge. But back to the outdoors, I mean, what would you say? I mean, how do you feel like in your body different when you're training outside than like when you're training inside? Like, just describe what that feels like. Because there's some people that they don't even know what we're talking about. Like, what do you mean train outside? Like, why would I do that? But I think there's a different essence to training outside. That it's just something more than just lifting up something and moving it. You know what I mean?
Right. So it's the narrow scope of perspective that most people have, just because they don't have the experience, or they've lost the experience of training in a very contextually rich environment. So again, we evolved as movers. Like our problem solving evolved outdoors. It was about running through some trees and like going after prey, right? So I'm yelling to you, you're yelling to me. I'm like, hey, he's running over the rock. You're gonna grab him, and you have to respond, and you have to build these patterns that are more about intuition and your own capacity to perform than they are about doing reps to get hypertrophy. You know what I mean? That's just one piece. People are going at it almost backwards, where they're trying to look a particular way and forgetting that the reason that we're attracted to the way that an individual looks, who's extremely muscular, lean, and healthy, is because we see them as someone who is evolutionarily successful, right? Mm-hmm. So very contextually rich environments. That's why most people, okay, so even though there are parkour gyms, and in parkour gyms, we try, it's almost like a playground where we get to customize our environments and make them continually different. You may see some themes in parkour gyms, but generally someone's like, oh no, that's where we put the elliptical. That we don't have things like that. It's like there's rails, there's boxes, there's bars. In some cases, there's padding for people to try things at a higher level of risk that they wouldn't be able to otherwise. But ultimately, the idea is to reintroduce this capacity to move in a safe environment that could then be taken out to solve problems and explore outside. So even the gyms in parkour are generally designed just to get you to the next step outside. The environment outside is very rich. There is no, I'm going to move this boulder in an environment that is easier for me to work out. So in the gym, generally people are taking an environment and building it around even the machines. All right, so you sit down in a machine. This machine maybe was designed to help you build your pecs or something, and we've built this machine around how you prefer to move. But if you look at it this way, imagine a picture of an outdoor, like a nature scene, okay? And you see a deer in the nature scene. Does the deer make sense in the nature scene? Of course, it's a deer in a nature scene. Then you see a human being on an elliptical. Does that make sense in a nature scene? It doesn't make sense. But if you see a human being bounding over rocks, swinging through trees, picking up logs, and building something, you know, that makes more sense. And it's not super sophisticated in that capacity, just to understand what it means to belong in your environment. So that's what people should really be seeking out, is not how can I go outside and then, you know, hang a pair of gymnastics rings and then train. Now I'm training in the woods. Like, no, you have to integrate yourself into the environment. And that's where it has the best effect on the psyche and, you know, your cognitive abilities is moving in nature and in the environment that you evolved to move in.
Okay, so I'm starting to get it at a different level right now. So what I'm hearing you say is that, like, when we move our body, especially in regard to, let's just say, exercise, lack of a better word, but when we're moving our body in a way that's evolutionarily appropriate, I'll say that, like, meaning the more natural you move your body, the more natural environment that you find yourself, you simply feel better. And here's why. And this is one of the things I was remembering about this, is that they, you know, there's some science that shows that they're looking at, you know, the things that we've done to survive are the things that make us feel good. There's a hormonal improvement when we do things that are like survival oriented, meaning, so like, why do we run marathons? Why do we like to shoot a bow and arrow? Like, there's this level of satisfaction with these things, and it's literally, they can measure with hormone levels, that when we do those things that are most like the things that we've done to get where we're at today, that those things make us feel good. They make us feel happy. So tracing that back to a gym on an elliptical, we didn't get where we're at by running in place. You know what I mean? Like, we just don't. And it doesn't. So so what do you know? Is there any science behind, like, you know, the difference between training in a gym versus outdoors, you know?
Yeah, I think there is. Most of it at this point, for me anyway, is experiential. I know that when I'm training consistently outdoors, I feel like sharper mentally. My problem solving skills are better. I experience less brain fog. My cognitive functions are really good, and generally I treat people better. So that's something that I don't think that people respect as much as they should, is that generally being a happy person makes you better to be around, whether that's at work or at home. I mean, so many people kind of go to work and then they put on a mask at work, and they try and be happy to perhaps customers they're interacting with or coworkers they don't exactly get along with, and they come home with that sort of open the door and kick the dog mentality. And generally that's not desirable. I don't think any of us want that. And that's something I've been able to do really well, is build a happy family. Listen, if you want to have a better relationship with your kids, the first thing you can do is move with them, is play with them. I can't explain the degree of connection that I feel with my daughter with words. You know, yesterday it was raining, and it was one of those like light, warm rains because it's spring, and we've got, you know, we don't get a ton of rain out here in Colorado, and at least where I'm at. And so when it rains, I'm not a guy who really likes to just hit the concrete and run for an extended period of time. I get pretty bored with that for the most part. But for me, it's very invigorating to run in the rain. I love to run in the rain. When it starts to rain, I love nothing more than I just like take my shirt off, shoes off, and go run around in the rain. If that's in the grass or that's in the woods or whatever, there's something about it that really charges me up. And so when it started raining yesterday, I was like, boy, I got to get my daughter Nova involved in that. So like, we're running around outside in the rain, chasing each other. And if someone would look out the window, they'd be like, what are these crazy people doing? but we're being very human in that moment because we're playing, and that type of play does go across species. But I would argue that humans have a higher capacity for experiencing that quality of consciousness, and that's another thing that movement gets you to faster than a lot of other things. So there are a few things that are unique to humans, like music, and that can get you that quality of consciousness. People talk about, singing in church or meditation and chanting and stuff like that. That gets people to that like really good, warm, fuzzy feeling, or being with your kids, and people feel that. But movement is a very fast way to get there. Don't underestimate its potential with your kids, and just the overall quality of consciousness that it can bring you. It's very deep. And I mean, I can say that that's happened. What's really rare is to find out with adults. So oftentimes I will hear people say, boy, my kids are really good at parkour. My kids still understand this stuff. I need to learn from them. I need to be a kid again. And I think that initially that's very important. But then you need to go deeper, and you need to say, what does it look like for me to role model what movement looks like as I mature? I had the wonderful opportunity to go to Rafe Kelly's Return to the Source camp, and that's in upstate. It's in Washington State, in the upper part of the state on the Pacific Coast, and it was amazing. I spent a few days up there with like-minded people. It attracted like-minded people, and all of us had a little bit of a parkour background, or at least they were healthy and fit. And we moved through his dad's place, which is in the woods up there, and camped together. And every day was about exploration and experimentation with movement. And this was huge for me, because it was the opportunity for me to really dedicate a series of days where all I was thinking about was being in nature and moving. And I was with like a group of friends. We became very tight knit very quickly, drew us together very fast. And otherwise we wouldn't have had the opportunity to meet and train together. And that impacted my quality of consciousness so much that I would argue probably a life-changing experience, just because in our modern lives, we don't get the opportunity to go and make that a focus. Training together outdoors. And it's deeper than that. I say training together, but that's just the common term I have to use. I don't know how well I can articulate the feeling of like running through forests at high speeds with a group of guys and gals as well, and then running up on like a cliff and diving into a waterfall, and then coming out a cave and climbing back up and doing it all over again. Time after time, to the point where you just feel like you've been totally reintroduced to that lifestyle.
Yeah, that's interesting, and I wanted to touch really quick too on. I don't know if this is going to be true for parkour and movement and the kind of things that we're talking about, but I remember with regard to like female participation. I remember like when I was snowboarding in like 1986, I was 10 years old or 11 years old. It was all like those teenage boys. I mean, it was just like literally like skaters, skateboarders, which are typically boys. But look at snowboarding now. I mean, you've got everybody doing it. I mean, every age, both genders. It's pretty much taken off. Do you see like what's your experience? I mean, I know that like parkour probably is similar, at least in the fact that it's probably male dominated. It's probably age, teens to in their 20s. Do you see it moving past that, beyond that? And like when you went to your training with Rafe Kelly, were there women there, and like what's in it for them?
Yeah, so I would say that there is a little bit of a curve in that, and I would argue that has more to do with first of all, we've neglected physicality with both genders as a culture, even more so with females. So that I would argue that has less to do with women being interested in it and more to do with just being told about what they need to do when they're training, when they're doing things physical. because it's been bred into them that they need to do, you know, the latest booty exercise or something like that. And oftentimes for them, you know, for self-confidence reasons or whatever, you see that their focus is on the aesthetics much more so than guys who are almost by culture, our culture in the US, given permission to do whatever they want physically and spend their time there, and that's fine. They can do what they want. They're gonna build muscle a little faster, and they're gonna not have to worry as much about body image as women will. So I think that there is an unfortunate perception that this kind of training can't bring you a physical image that you're happy with, which is absolutely wrong. So you have this group of people. You have like the big is beautiful people, and then you have the bodybuilding aesthetics imagery, or strong is the new sexy and stuff like that. But this is all still focused on aesthetics. You're still looking at someone, and then we're trying to force the culture to approve the way that they look and say that's the fix. But that's not the fix. The fix is that if you go out and you develop an appreciation and a deep happiness from movement, the body will come. It will come. You'll fix your hormones are going to be better balanced. That's a huge part of managing, you know, a healthy body weight. And I see a lot more of the sort of anti-culture women involved in parkour, and they have the same self-confidence issues that everybody else has. But it's not like, they're not like, oh, I'm trying to get my parkour booty. Like, no one, that doesn't even make sense. Like, I don't even know what a parkour booty is.
Somebody will invent it.
Maybe somebody can help in the comments to help us understand what parkour booty is. Yeah. But, you know, so I'll talk a little bit about that. So let's talk about integration. So obviously we all can't quit our jobs and run off into the woods. Some of us can, good for you, but we all can't do that. So how do we reintroduce this type of movement into our day-to-day lives? And that's been a focus of mine for the last 4 years that I've worked for a tech company, is how do we bring that level of value for movement back into our working lives? And one of the benefits that I worked with leadership on, that you're going to be hearing a lot more of in the future, and we could probably do a separate interview just on this topic, is a benefit called PTF, which is paid time fitness. And this really is the concept of, as a teaser, bringing recess and the opportunity for outdoor training back into the workplace. Because, you know, years ago we didn't have this problem. Everybody wasn't doing they weren't doing these office jobs. There was a segment of society that was doing that, and other people had manual labor jobs. And although it may have been depressing for them to work in a factory, generally speaking, they were still moving. Now the majority of our society is literally sitting in a chair all day long, and it's killing them. So how do we reintroduce this philosophy to our day-to-day lives and still be integrated with technology and solving problems that only human beings have the capacity to solve, for all that we know? Okay, that's one thing. That's one project I'm working on, and we've successfully done that at Encompass Technologies, which is where the tech company I'm working for right now. And I can tell you more about that another time, or whenever. But the other factor is the gyms. So Apex Movement has a sort of traveling ladies' night at on the Front Range, and so in parkour, it's very easy to see women integrated with men. It's a lot like snowboarding. You just go out and you do it, and the barrier to entry is relatively low. No one is super judgmental. There's not a ton of physical contact. So there isn't a lot that should be scaring anyone off, regardless whether it's, you know, age 8 to 108, or male versus female, or zero integration into physicality and full integration into being like an athlete in college or something like that. And so what we do is we run these ladies jams, and girls, it's free. They can come in, and it is all ladies, just because we found that that developing a community where people can see females in a positive light moving in the community, they can come and train for free. So you're like, I don't know about parkour. It seems like it's just a bunch of guys on YouTube jumping off buildings. But I think it sounds interesting to me. I want to try it, but I don't even know how to jump. I don't even know how to balance. I feel very awkward. And this is a very safe environment to introduce that. And that's been incredibly popular. The attendance ranges from like, the high 20s to almost 50, and they're on a monthly basis. And they just travel across the gyms that are on the Apex gyms on the Front Range. So, one of our students, Laura, and she's younger, in her teens, she sort of helped kick that off. And it's been a huge movement that's spread across the gyms.
That's cool. Yeah. We all have bodies and they all move. That's just right. And you can take anybody regardless of their ability level and teach them something new. That's a stretch beyond where they're at now, but still is safe. It still is an interesting thing for them to do. I think as human beings, we like small challenges. Here's what we like. We like to feel both successful and challenged at the same time, right? We like that. We like to know that give me something I can stretch for. Let me know that I can do it. I go do it. That makes me feel really good. You talked about the hormone thing, and then there's the next thing. And I want to say this too, with regard to the hormones, I always teach my clients about, feeling good to look good. It's totally different. Everybody's like, yeah, I want to look good so that I can feel, then I'll be happy. If I can just get my butt raised, then everything is well. And the truth is, like, the very thing that like is holding them back a lot of times is that attitude of like, I've got to look good first to feel good. And if they could just start to do things to open them up, to just feel really good in their body, to feel really whole, to feel really connected, to have community, to feel like they're in an environment that's interesting, then they start to relax. They start to balance some of the things, and then they get the raised butt, they get the parkour booty.
Yeah.
So,
right.
Yeah. If somebody was, it's listening to this and they're like, okay, that's cool. I don't have a parkour gym. These are relatively new. I don't even know where I would go find one. Let's say they wanted to get started introducing the concept just of interest. Let's call it interesting movement. It's really generic, right? Like interesting movement into their life, and they want to get outdoors more. Are there resources? What's the easiest way for somebody just I don't know what I want to do, but I want to get outside because I'm sick of being inside all the time. And I want to do something that's good for me too. What do I do? Step one.
Yeah. So step one is first to realize that you have a problem and you need to do something about it. Your livelihood depends on it. People are concerned about getting older and not being a burden to their family, or people are concerned just about losing what they have. So I want to be the first potentially to tell people that you don't have to lose it. There is no reason to believe that it isn't possible for humans to find a way to solve the problem of aging, first of all. And that's something we have the capacity to do, and perhaps we're the only species that does. But in the meantime, before we wait for some awesome future technology, decades down, but hopefully sooner down the road, that will allow you to use medicine to keep your body healthy when it just starts to age. It's really your biological responsibility to take care of your own stuff, sweep your own porch. So what you've got to do is first realize that it is irresponsible to give up on yourself and say, okay, it's just me, I'm just getting old. There are plenty of people who I know who are doing amazing things well past, well into their 50s and 60s. And I'm sure there are others older than that still doing amazing things that there's not on my radar. So that's the first step, is you don't give up, and don't use the cop out of I'm getting old. You sound like if you remember, Uncle Ricky from Napoleon Dynamite, who's like, well, back in high school, I could throw a football over those mountains. You sound like that when you say things like, oh, when I was a kid, I could run like that. I don't know how many people have told me, you know, when I was a kid, I do backflips on trampoline. Trampoline's a very soft thing. Like, you should be able to trampoline for a very long time. And or when I was a kid, I could run outside barefoot and it didn't even bother me. Well, I mean, these are things that when you say these things, it feels nostalgic to think about, but really you should still be trying to do them. If not just to be a role model for your kids. I mean, my daughter looks at me and she's around me when I'm training, and she sees me striding from, you know, 9-10 foot pillars off the ground, jumping, climbing in trees, doing flips, inverting, lifting heavy things, and that's going to be the norm to her growing up. Like, she's going to grow up and expect that that's what adults about. Are you still there, Trav?
Yeah, we had a little bit of a glitch there. I think we might have went quiet, but it's okay. I think we're still good. I think you ended up, the last thing that we heard was that little Nova sees her dad do really cool things, and she's going to think that that's the norm, that when you get older, of course you jump from tree to tree.
Yeah, perfect. So that's what I want. That's what I want people to understand. The other thing that you can do to start is just understand that, you know, you can start with the basics. You just need to hang from something. You need to be able to do some type of movement that is not involving a machine that's independent of you, and then you start from there. Focus on the things that make you excited to move. If that's dance, then that's dance. If that's running, then that's running. But where it really starts to get interesting is when you use it for problem solving. I mean, if someone asks me what my preferred way of training is, I would generally say it's problem solving. There's a lot of questions I get about programming. How do I program for this? How do you program for life? It's very difficult. It's more about you introduce yourself to a new context, and then you have a problem and you have to solve it. Work is this way, relationships are this way, making money is this way. Why wouldn't movement be the same? So find ways to challenge yourself. And part of that requires some reintroduction or training, and that's what a good movement coach could do, either a parkour coach or someone who's well-versed in this sort of experiential learning and movement. But going out, finding a problem and solving it. So in parkour, a very basic thing might be, I see a fence, I want to get over it. Okay, what options do I have for getting over it? I see a park bench, I want to get over it. What options? Okay, I'm good at that. What options do I have for getting under it? All right, can I get off the floor with using one hand, with using no hands on my knees, with using just my butt and my feet? You know, these are some of the measures that doctors are using to determine the longevity of an individual. How long will you be able to live independently? Some doctors are measuring this by doing a simple test where you lie down on your back on the ground, and then they ask her, well, how can you get up from this position? And they measure how many points of contact you have to use to get up. Do you have to use your hands or not? Some doctors are measuring overall grip strength. We know that one of the best ways to build grip strength is to use our arms for what they were designed for, and that is, you know, hanging from something, you know, having an apparatus to hang from. So reintroducing, if you don't have any of these things in your house, like, those are the only tools that you probably really need to go out and get. If you don't have anything to hang from, and you spend all day in a chair or in your car or in any capacity in which you're not hanging or brachiating or using your arms to dangle from something, then you need to reintroduce that to your environment. So I would say, you know, don't tell your kids, don't hang from that, don't climb on that. Let them hang from it and climb from it, and they'll live longer and healthier. You know, people are losing height because of this. Like, people are literally shrinking as teenagers and pre-adolescents because their T-spine's rounding out. They're not hanging from anything. They're typing. Everybody's on a phone or an iPad, and they're like this. And they're losing height, and they have spinal issues because of it. So it's a serious issue.
I don't remember if it was you or I just was talking to somebody and they said that they're now measuring kids even in their early elementary age. They're already looking at the angle of their how they hold their neck, and it's already like 10 to 15 degrees forward more than it was just like 10 or 15 years ago. Don't quote me on that, but that's like basically what they're showing. And it's wise because we're walking around with a phone all the time. If we're not on a phone or on a computer, and this next generation, I mean, I don't even want to know like what it's going to be like unless we. And I think this is where the cool thing is that this moving naturally and getting outside and doing these things, it is the cure. I mean, even like I look at like gardening. I love to garden. I mean, it solves so many issues, right? I'm getting vitamin D, which we know there's a vitamin D issue in the population. It's producing organic vegetables, which we know otherwise vegetables are toxically loaded with all kinds of crap. There's good bacteria that when I work in the soil gets underneath my skin and actually boosts my probiotic. There's a bacteria that helps boost the probiotics in the body. I mean, so just getting outside is who we are as a species, and anything that can get us back into what we're supposed to be doing is huge. So I like that. I like that philosophy, and I like where you're coming from with all this. We have an opportunity. And I want to talk about this opportunity that we have here locally. You're actually going to be coming to Cedar Rapids here soon, and going to be doing some really cool stuff with an event that we've got planned. So I'm going to talk about that, and then we'll give some final thoughts. Have you share some final thoughts on the topic? But let's talk about this. So May 9th, if you're here local, if you're in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, this is your hometown. You're coming back, and we're going to do a joint little venture together. It's going to be kind of an exploration into movement. But I wanted to let you talk about what that's going to be like, what people might experience, and then give them a way that we can get them in contact with one of you or I so that they could get signed up for that.
Yeah, I'd love to talk about that for a second. So I'm always looking for ways to reintroduce what my experiences have been and my learnings have been back to people that are close to me, and coming back to Iowa and doing the workshop is gonna be awesome. So, it's tough to explain to people what it's going to be like when they may not have ever experienced anything like it before. So I'll just say a few things about it. It's gonna be physically challenging, but in a way, and it's gonna be mentally challenging, but in a way that potentially you haven't experienced. Because initially we talked about getting started and how do we get started in movement if we've been sort of exploring this philosophy, and I talked a little bit about the physical movements that you can do, but really you need to get out. First step is take your shoes off, go outside, and just spend some time walking through the grass, getting grounded. Your feet, there's so much sensory on your feet, and it's going to give you such good feelings from going out and spending time like that. If you can, do it with your kids, do it with a loved one, and then spend less time training in that very rigorous format. Then maybe start experimenting. Try and find a physical problem to solve, where it's getting over something, or it's moving something, or playing tag, or reintroducing sort of spontaneous physicality to your practice. And then down the road, once you started working with some of those problems and you start to see the benefits of it, you want to begin to introduce the next level, which is fear. Because people think that, okay, this is all just play. And that's true, it is. We're going to learn a lot from play. But just like animals who start out, roughhousing and playing, and little like baby tigers and stuff, and pumas or whatever, go and like roughhouse and bite each other and play. That's where you need to start. But ultimately, that's to learn skills to do much more dangerous and intense things. So while we won't be working on attacking each other like tigers at the workshop, we will be working on some fear challenges and just very controlled, safe ways to reintroduce how to apply movement to time-sensitive situations and things like that. The workshop will be outdoors, rain or shine. We're going to be running through the woods. We'll bring some shoes that are good for that. If you've never done barefoot training, I don't recommend just trying this workshop out barefoot for the first time. That'll be kind of rough. Bring clothes that can be weather appropriate, and just bring, if you're ready to do it, if you can walk and you have a good attitude and you're ready to experience something new and amazing, then I think the workshop's right for you. You can find the workshop. We'll link it up for Facebook. You can, if you want to get a hold of me, you can contact me at travis@apexmovement.com. And just, if you're in that area, it's money back, man. If it doesn't work out for you and you didn't like it, that's fine. It's a new concept, but I guarantee that if you come in with an open mind and willing to work hard, that it could be life changing for you for sure.
Trav, I'm a 55-year-old woman. Is this workshop right for me?
Of course, yeah. So movement is scalable. It is like, I don't know how to explain it. People think that age is the barrier to entry, but man, I have got some 14-year-olds, some 12-year-olds who don't move as well as some of the people who are like in their 40s and 50s in our gym. So I wouldn't let that hold you back at all, because it's going to be good for you. You're going to be able to potentially, I'm assuming if you're in that age bracket, that you probably have some kids, maybe even some grandkids, and you're going to want to come and experience something that will give you the opportunity to come back to your kids and grandkids and teach them something about physicality and about movement, to be interesting in them, to be seen as a hero. The first time you go to, almost every time I go to a park and I just train nonchalantly with my daughter, I get comments like, "Oh my gosh, that's Spider-Man. Is that guy Spider-Man?" Like, they think that I'm some sort of like, character, just because I'm an adult that has something to do with movement that's more interesting than what they're currently playing with. They want to learn this stuff. And humans, like of any age, want to learn this stuff. We've just been, manipulated into believing that it's something that's just for kids, that we don't need recess as adults, that we don't need to increase our capacity to solve problems through movement or experience life and happiness through movement as we've gotten older.
Last question on the seminar that you're going to present. As far as when you say challenging, I want to make sure, and when people hear that, what kind of challenging? I mean, I don't want people to think, I'm assuming this isn't like, I run a boot camp, right? And the boot camp is challenging in the way that we're doing like lots of hardcore stuff. I mean, it's resistance training, it's running, it's constant go, go, go. This is more of an educational seminar with an aspect of challenge that's different than like hauling big sandbags around or something like that, right?
Well, it depends on your level. So let me give you an example of some things we might do. Okay. So one might be, we have a hill or something, and that you have to ascend. All right. And for someone who is least experienced, I'm going to say, I'm going to ask you to find a route up that's safe. I'm going to give you the skills to get up there, and then we're gonna train those skills. This is very basic. There's really much more than just this, but I'm trying to keep a simple analogy. All right. If I have a fire-breathing 16-year-old, I'm gonna make a challenge that's different. First I'm gonna test him. I'm like, can you do it with any degree of like safety and confidence? Assuming he can, he's just a fire breather. Then I'm gonna give him an incredibly challenging way to do that. So it's same task, but we're gonna accomplish it differently depending on who we are. Then maybe even if that's easy for him, if he finds some way to climb up a tree, swing and fly 16 feet and land on top of a rock without that being challenging, okay, let's say we've got somebody like that, then I'm going to introduce the concept of chase or time sensitivity, or I might blindfold him. I don't know. I'm going to find where people need work, and then we go from there. Okay, so if you're 55 and you've been doing some of the boot camp stuff, and you just like, you feel like you're in pretty good shape, you feel maybe like you're in the best shape of your life, and you want to come out and get a challenge, it's still a fit for you, because what if you have to get to your grandkid and they're on top of that hill and they're going to fall? Or what if you're just like, that's where you need to go, your car stalled, and now the only way to safety is to go to another place. I'm trying to give some real scenarios if you don't enjoy just climbing up hills for fun like I do. So then I'm going to give you the safest way to do that and let you practice it. And it is going to be very physically demanding, because it's going to include both neurological stressors and it's going to include physical stressors. So it will be a challenge that that you will probably love and get some type of high from, but chances are you haven't been training that way, because nobody is sitting at a gym, running on a treadmill, looking at a magazine, staring at 24-hour news, feeling a sense of urgency.
Amen.
Right, you know what I mean? But if I'm like, okay, now I'm going to chase you. You think that's easy? I'm going to chase you. So there's that. And then, but if people aren't comfortable with that, then I'm going to find a way to challenge them that's simpler. You know, we're going to go over this log. I'm going to show you how to get over it safely. Or we're going to stretch in a way that you haven't moved before, but you need to be able to move in order to continue to function independently as you get older. And then it'll be humbling. It will be humbling. If you come out of there and you're not humbled, you weren't paying attention or you ducked out.
Yeah. Cool. It sounds like it's going to be really exciting. I'm looking forward to that. The other thing, it's going to be at Palisades. We're scoping out places right now. Palisades is locally. If you have never been there, it's a beautiful place. There's actually some lots of sand. We can incorporate some sand work, movement on sand possibly. I think it's going to be a really diverse little scenario for people to work on. Details are still coming. We're going to get some sign up information out there to you. If you're listening to this, refer back. Again, 2 ways of doing this. You can either contact Travis at apexmovement.com, or you can contact me, Travis at travislrichardson.com. One of those two, or refer back to the email or the Facebook, whatever it is that you got here to this interview, and find the link there. We're going to have some sign up information and some more information there as well. So Trav, thanks for being on. Do you have any further last comments for the audience?
No, I mean, I just would encourage everybody to come out to the workshop if you're in the area, or start following us on Facebook. You know, if you make it out to the workshop, it is going to be a Peter Pan Lost Boy adventure for sure, and you're going to have a blast.
I'm excited. It's going to be great. I'm really looking forward to seeing you, and it's going to be on May 9th again. So safe travels on your way out here, and we'll see you soon, Trav.
Thanks, brother.
Bye.
Bye.